Okay, we are live. Thank you for tuning in to Rock Your Life with Nora Finch. This is a podcast that is inspired by my 20 plus years in holistic wellness and my training in the self-defense system of Krav Maga, where basically I talk about everything that I have learned and the mindset that it helped create me by training in that system. And so Mr. Ryan Wyatt, we'll say hi to him first today. Hi, Ryan.
Hello, everybody.
From Arizona, right? Arizona?
I'm in Tucson.
Yeah. Okay, Tucson, Arizona. Okay, so again, in my first responder series, which most of my shows are dedicated to, and my interest, I got interested in them when I was taking Krav Maga, and I had always wondered how they dealt with their stress outside of drugs and alcohol, and kind of what the American culture kind of gives as means to manage life and also help try to prevent more suicides. Okay, so today's show, Brother Ryan does not know why I picked him. I never told you this before. But basically, I had a facial client I was working on, and I don't know how this came about, if she was talking about how she still had some brain damage or what it was, but that she was at a party. I don't know, maybe she was about 19, and basically all the people in the room drank from, I believe it was a water cooler, and that was spiked with, is it GHB? GHB. Okay, so picture the scene of some kind of Kool-Aid Jim Jones situation. The whole room was splayed out. And basically, they saved her life by doing a needle cryotomy.
Cricothyrotomy, so
yes,
accessing your airway through her neck.
And I don't know the order of it, but basically she either went into a coma or whatever it is, but they saved her life, and they ended up coming back and telling her that they were she was the first person that they practice on. Because at that, right, yeah, when they were just learning. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, what's that? So I went to look it up, and I looked on YouTube, and I found your video. And I was like, oh my God, okay, that's a badass instructor. Because I know what I'm looking for in an instructor, like when I learn things, a lot of attention to detail. And it's got to be laid out in a certain way for my brain to kind of understand, even though a little bit of the ADD will mess me up. And when there's steps involved, and I didn't finish listening to the whole video, but I mean, I watched that one, and then I went to another one that was talking about how you taught yourself with your ADD and different things, if you want to say a learning disability, whatever you want to call it, that your learning was affected and you had to create, I don't know, this way for you to learn material. And so that's how you came about. And I think it's really important because a lot of us don't grow up knowing what our learning style is. And so I think that will help you, again, learn material more effectively or better if you find the right instructor for you. And so I know that can really help, paramedics and, EMTs out there. Of course, to me, it's very complicated material. And so, and complex. So I want to help them in the show today with that. And then we're going to talk about some other areas, but attention to detail. And I also need a lot of repetition. So that's how you came about. And then I listened to one of your other shows that you sent me, Tactical Tangents. That's what it's called, right? And I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. So, okay. So thank you for showing up there. That's how I found you.
Oh, no, that's an interesting story. Cause I always wondered how, from that very first call, how did all the instructors in the world, how'd you find me?
Well, I saw on there it's Pima Paramedics, right?
Pima Paramedics.
And I think you did have your name on there, and I'm like, I'm just going to try, because sometimes you email people or call. I called and you called me back, like almost like within a day.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah. And I've heard from people from New Zealand, from Austria, from around the world, from Pima Paramedic. So it was an unintended consequence, that we made these videos, and then it got put up on YouTube on our channel. And it's been awesome from the response.
Well, it's good because we're not going to know, people watching it might not even know, wow, it's because the way he said that, I got that, and it's patience. your patience and being able to say, well, this is why I do it like this. This is why you go from the left side instead of the right. This is the whatever, you know what I mean? And everybody has their unique perspective and insight whenever you're learning something. So I like to gather all these sorts of resources and like, okay, that works for me. I like how he breaks it down.
Well, and that was a learning style, like you said. I also have pretty strong ADHD, and we didn't know the word spaced repetition. I'm 50 years old. We didn't know that back then, how that was, but that was the only way I could learn. And I took Taekwondo. And what's Taekwondo? It's doing the same thing. It's doing that kata 50 times until you get it right. We didn't know it was called spaced repetition. But then, working with doctors and working in the trauma center, this word came about. And like, this is how I learn, right? And this is how I teach my class, I'm teaching today. And so I'll say something probably 6 times in a 30-minute lecture. One word, 6 times, like right side of the neck. I'll incorporate that 6 times. So they'll hear that, and that's spaced repetition. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, when they're stressed out, it's their first crike on a patient that drank GHB from a water cooler, they'll remember be on the right side of the neck if you're right-handed. So that's exactly how I teach. That's how I learn, is by just over and over and over and over. And I felt that very effective as a paramedic. And
Okay,
as a
good.
shooter.
Okay, so let's talk about that next, but let's tell everybody really quickly a little bit on your background.
Sure. So my name's Ryan Wyatt. I'm a critical care flight paramedic. I started in the Navy in 1990, so a long time ago. I broke my leg in high school, watched the bone come out of my leg, and thought, I want to be a paramedic. And that was the defining moment for me. And so I went to the Navy. I was a corpsman. And so I did about almost 5 years total in the Navy. And then I made the mistake of getting out. I should have stayed in for a 20-year career, but I got out, and getting out in 1994 September in San Diego, because then I did a year reserve. But that was like getting out of prison. The gates closed behind you, and you're a civilian again. But at that point, we didn't have any certs. So everything I did in the Navy, every hospital I went to in Newport Beach, Hoag Hospital, they said, oh my God, you're overqualified. If you do any of this stuff, you're going to jail. And so I got very depressed and very upset at the world, and did over-the-road truck driving for a couple of years, because that's what my dad did since Vietnam. But I was a people person, so trucking wasn't for me. And then I killed bees in Orange County, California for about 3 years, but always loved medicine. And, always stop on the side of the road and help people. I'm like, I need to be a paramedic, And so I put myself through paramedic school. And then California was not the place for me to practice paramedicine, because I was such a strong corpsman in the Navy that I wanted an expanded scope. So I moved to Arizona, and that's where I met my wife. And she was an EMT, and she said, hey, do you want to move to Tucson? We were both working at the ambulance company in Phoenix. And I said, no, who wants to move to Tucson? Well, she went to medical school in Tucson, so we moved to Tucson. And now she's an ER sports doc. And it afforded me the time to go to be a flight paramedic, to be a paramedic instructor at Pima, where I'm teaching today. I've been here almost 16 years. I work at the trauma center. I run an IV ultrasound program. So I teach people, medics, docs, nurses, how to start IVs using an ultrasound machine, which is amazing. And I got bored doing that. So I went to Iraq with Blackwater and DynCorp as a flight paramedic and as a Lil Bird guy. And that was probably the best job that I've ever had in my life, and made a big difference over there. We'd covered people like John McCain and, all these dignitaries. We did high threat protection. And 4.5 years later, I came home, because my wife said, come home or don't. So I'm home, and I still fly here in Arizona. I still work at the trauma center. I teach at Pima. I'm the master sergeant of training for the Arizona Rangers Tucson company. So I'm in charge of all their training. So we support local, federal, and state law enforcement. We look like law enforcement people. So just kind of trying to raise the bar everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yes, so you have some experience.
A little bit.
Yes, yes. But would you say you're mostly doing education or just not
I would
really,
say,
like
yeah,
both?
definitely. I only fly maybe 3 days a month. I work at the trauma center 4 days a month. But I teach, like I taught ultrasound there yesterday, and then I teach with these guys here at Pima. And I do also another thing. Actually, Nora, since we met, I do this thing called AZ Medic. So I go around people's homes and put IVs in them and hydrate them, and that involves a lot of education as well. So we can educate, not only at the medical level, but at the most basic level, people just trying to understand how to be hydrated and how to stay healthy and stuff like that. So,
And is there such thing as a wrong way to do it?
to do an IV,
Yeah.
oh,
Since I
absolutely,
don't know,
yeah.
since I don't know, like you can mess it up, like if you don't, right?
You can mess it up. You can hit a nerve. You can put it into an artery accidentally, and that could cause some serious consequences. You can use, catheter size. People try to use these big catheters all the time on people that don't need it, and that causes PTSD. You know,
Oh shit.
you know.
So what's a good way for them to remember to do it the correct, other than practicing? Is
I
there?
think the best way. I mean, for EMTs and paramedics and people doing IVs watching this, this shows, we have different gauges. So, a 14 gauge is like the size of a ballpoint pen. This thing's huge. And then we have like little 24 gauges, which I would put like in a 1 day old baby. So I usually, probably 90% of my IVs are the middle of the road. I use a 20 gauge, which is kind of pink in color. And it's a very neutral sized catheter. Like I can give you blood through there. I can push anything I want through a 20. And it's relatively painless versus the big 18 or 16 or 14, things that go in people's chests. So I think using the right size catheter and just never using an IV as payback. That drunk at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're up and you're tired and it's raining and you're like, just this drunk, I've ran on him 3 times this week. I'm going to put a big needle in his arm and kind of teach him a lesson. I think not doing that is what paramedics should be striving to do.
Mm-hmm.
I started 20 years ago, 25 years ago. If you didn't put a 14 gauge, which is a ginormous catheter, if you didn't put a 14 gauge in everybody, you are a wimp, and you shouldn't be a paramedic. And man, we hurt people. We hurt people for years. So
Why do you mean? Why would they do that? What do you mean you're being a wimp by using?
it was the big mantra of go big or go home, and it was like a badge to put these ginormous IVs in frail people, in like I said, in drunks and in IV drug addicts. Kind of like, I'll show you, and it would cause a lot of pain in these people, and it would give them anxiety and PTSD, and it would cause these clots to go all the way, so you can see, all the way up in their arm. That would cause these blood clots that we'd have to admit them in the hospital. And one thing I did here in Tucson is I was a really big pioneer of no more big catheters. And, teaching at the college here, I trained thousands of paramedics, thousands. And my nurses at the hospital know, on my ultrasound program, you're not going to use anything bigger than an 18.
Well, that just sounds strange to me, though, that's like a common thing, or it was something to even have an issue with.
It's a sad secret. It's a sad secret of the old school of paramedicine, of 20 years of tradition unimpeded by evidence.
I'm gonna show you because
I can't.
you should.
Yeah.
But why? Because you shouldn't be dehydrated because you're out.
Yeah, like people would use them just to be mean. Oh, this guy bit or hit a police officer. Well, when I do the IV, I'll show him, and I'm going to put a big painful IV in his arm. Or the opiate addict. Well, I'm going to give him straight up 2 milligrams of Narcan and put him in fulminant withdrawal. I'll teach him.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it's just not. You have to be an advocate.
Mm-hmm.
You're an advocate of keeping us alive and helping our brains become better and survive this mental trauma. We need to be advocates for our patients on this side.
I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually this reminds me of something, and I was watching, I don't know if it was something from the UK, and they brought up, I think I was thinking about self-defense. So have you had people that come off of their high, right? And they like you saved their life and they're acting all crazy or whatever it is, like what is your method again, or do you have the same method? I don't know why specifically. I think I was thinking of self-defense, what to do. But do you just like stay calm because they're going to be pissed at you, right?
Oh yeah,
For saving their life.
yeah. That
Or
happens quite frequently with our chronic alcoholics when they come out of their stupor, or especially our opiate withdrawal people. And you've got two choices. You can either get angry back at them, which is not going to help, and it's going to
right.
just escalate that situation to where now it can actually become physically, a problem. Or you can, what I do with my patients, I have been called every word in the book. I mean, every name you can imagine when these people come out of their high, and it's because they're in pain. That's why. And you just have, if you have some empathy, I think that's the big word that people miss.
Yes.
And people think sympathy and all that is different. You have to be empathetic. You have to understand why they're there, and I learned this from myself from being in Iraq. You know, there was some type of trigger event that made me do what I did, or made me have the maybe too much Michelob Ultra, right, when I came home, because that's how I dealt with it. And I think people forget that these people that are addicts, most of them have a triggering event. They were raped, they were molested, maybe they got in a car crash, and the physician, 10 years ago prescribed them 40 oxycodone, because that's what we did back then. We didn't know. And then we overprescribed, so we would get good satisfaction scores, right? Nora comes in the hospital, she breaks her finger, the doctor gives her Tylenol, you give a bad review, Medicare gets down on the doctor, says you should have given her oxycodone. So then next time you get 15 oxycodone and you instantly get hooked. You didn't go there to become an addict. That trigger event caused you to become dependent on opiates, and then that spirals out of control. And I think people forget about having empathy, like remembering why and asking them, hey, what caused it? What drove you? I know you don't want to be like this, right? What happened to you? Oh, I have Crohn's disease. I have bowel cancer, and I got hooked on opiates, and now that's how I'm going to live my life. That's what I want to do. Okay, that's your choice, right? Does it always work? No. They still sometimes say, hey, F you, and pull their IV out and run out of the ER. Absolutely. And we let them go because I can't hold them against their will. But what I don't do is I don't escalate up with them. As a law enforcement person, I can't do that. As a paramedic, especially in the back of a moving ambulance, I can't do that. I'm in a helicopter. I'm never going to argue with a patient in a helicopter, right? In the ED, I've got a little bit more leverage because I've got security that I'm surrounded by, and we'll put their patient in restraints, or we'll chemically or physically sedate them. But I don't argue with my patients. I don't use food as a weapon, like a lot of people do. Like if they wanted a sandwich, I'll give them two. You know what I'm saying? Like it's tit for tat. Like you want something, well, I want something, and this is how it's going to be. And if they're somewhat rational, it works. If they're not, we don't always win every battle.
So what happens? Do you do a lot of repetition and just saying things like, I need you to calm down, or like, how are you
I don't
talking
use
to
that
them?
word.
Or
I don't use the calm down word because people get really
hate that.
pissed.
Right. Hate that.
I am calm. You're the one that's not calm. Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So I just kind of repeat what I want from them. Look, I need you to not leave your room. Okay, you're in a busy emergency room right now. You can say the things you want to say. You need to lower your voice because you're being very disruptive in my emergency department, and you're not the only patient here. And sometimes I'll lie to them. I'll say, I've got a kid that can hear you. Well, they don't know if they do or not, right?
Right.
But I got a kid that can hear you scream these obscenities. Would you want your kid to hear this? I don't think so. What is it that I can do for you? What is it that you want? I want an Uncrustable sandwich, with 2 jellies. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go talk to the doc. I think I can make that happen for you. But this is what I need you to do. Okay, I need you to stay inside your room. I need you to lower your voice. I need you to quit calling me every name in the book. That's what I need you to do. Can you do that? F you. Well, F me means that I'm not going to do what you need to do then. And usually, believe it or not, I win. because they want their sandwich, they want their water, they want something, they want a blanket, you know, because they're homeless. Like, dude, I will give you a pair of scrubs and a blanket if you just lower your voice. You know?
Well, I think this is going back again to the assertive and being confident in like asserting control, that like you're the boss in the moment.
Yeah,
you know what I
also,
mean? And not feeling like out of control. But we could probably talk about this more, but let's go back to, I was talking about instruction style and, maybe like helping out the younger kids, or I was going to say, new to the industry or within 5 years. Is there, since I'm not a first responder, is there something like an example that you can give? We just talked about the IV infusion. Is there something else as far as like when they're first learning that you think you could advise them on, like how to help them learn? Like maybe you could talk about the spaced repetition. I'd like to hear more about that on something, anything.
I think
The
what's
heart
very
thing?
important,
Okay, go ahead.
what's really important, everybody, you already mentioned it, everybody has different learning styles. And as an instructor, when it's my first day with a class, for example, I'm really trying to pay attention to who's looking at me versus who's looking at the PowerPoint, right? Looking at their book. Hopefully they're not on their phone, because then they're on the internet, which they shouldn't be. And then coming up to some of those students and say, hey, I just did it for this class today. We have a new teaching tool here. And I asked them, hey, is this beneficial to you? Is there value added to this? What do you think about this? It's not, I'm dictating to you as an instructor. It's like, help me help you. What the majority of the class likes to learn, from me doing the 16 years, by stories. I'm not the instructor that reads off the PowerPoint. I say, Nora,
Right.
the alphabet is A, B, C, D, E. I will say, okay, A stands for airway. Let's talk about airway for a second. And I will give an example about airway that I've had, both good and bad, successes and humiliation stories, right?
Okay, can you do that? Can you do that then right now? Would that be a good example for them? How to remember, what is it? Airways. What did you say?
So, I was talking about like A is airway. And I won't just read off the PowerPoint is what I'm trying to say. Like, PowerPoints have a lot of words, and I'll take the gist of the PowerPoint, and I kind of know like what they need to know for the exam as well. And I'll turn that into one of the stories that I've done, the thousands and thousands of calls that I've done over 25 years. And I'll say, okay, let's talk about airway, like I did today for my group. I had the scariest call of my life was a pulmonary edema, CHF pulmonary edema patient. And so we talked about what happened and how he blew so much fluid out of his ET tube. It was spraying all over the ambulance on Christmas Eve in front of his family. And I thought this guy was going to die. And it's probably one of the worst patients I've had in my whole career. But, my
What
training,
happened? What happened though? Tell a brief story. Oh, okay.
I was very aggressive with him, and we intubated him. So put a tube in his mouth, like the COVID people you hear about.
So what happened though? Because I don't know anything about. Okay, so what happened to him?
So he was an elderly guy. This is Christmas Eve, and he collapsed at like a family, like our version of Family Dollar down here in rural Arizona. And I was on the helicopter that night, and so the ambulance would bring them to the hospital. Well, we're based at the hospital, but if the patient was really sick, they don't need to go to this really, really low-level hospital. I work them in the back of the ambulance, and then I fly them to my trauma center, for example. Mm-hmm. And so I remember the doc was outside, and they said, hey, this is a severe heart attack. The crew thought he was having a heart attack. And so the doctor looks at me, and she says, Ryan, if he's having a heart attack, this hospital is the last place he needs to be. Fly him out of here. I'm not even going to go see the patient, because the doctor can't, right? If she sees the patient, now it's hers. They got to come into the hospital. So I jump in the back of the ambulance. I had a brand new nurse. This guy's sick, Nora. He's flailing around. He's hypoxic. His O2 sat is like 70%. He won't take the oxygen. He's like trying to rip it off and throw it across the ambulance. I'm like, oh my God. And they said, oh, he's having a heart attack. I'm like, this is not presenting like a heart attack. And he wasn't. He had a left bundle branch block, which your paramedics on this podcast will know what that means. And so I'm doing this criteria called scarbosa. I said, he's not having a heart attack. This is CHF pulmonary edema. His lungs are literally filling up with fluid. And he's like almost blowing bubbles as he's fighting us. And so my nurse, they were like, oh my God, like this guy's going to die in front of us. This can't happen on Christmas Eve. His family's outside the ambulance. And so, I'm the senior person on this call. So I'm like, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to intubate him, but we have to resuscitate before we intubate, meaning, I need his oxygen saturation higher. And so I use this medication that sedates you, but I only used half the dose. So I used 10 milligrams of etomidate just to like get control of him, right? So he's not so violent. And bagged him and bagged him and bagged him and bagged him over his face and got his O2 set to 87%, wasn't going to go higher. And I made the decision, we're gonna sedate him, paralyze him, and I'm going to intubate him. And so that's what I did. And so much fluid came out of that ET tube. I remember just spraying on the side of the ambulance on the inside. I'm looking at the paramedic and I said, I'm so sorry about your ambulance right now. I'm so sorry. And then, put him on 20 of PEEP, which is positive expiratory pressure. It helps blow the fluid out of the lungs. Did a high dose nitro drip on him, which dilates the vessels, once again, removing fluid from the lungs. And I was in the back of the ambulance about 47 minutes. That's a long time. For your listeners know, that is a long scene time. But if I would have just ripped them out of the ambulance and threw them in the helicopter and tried to do all that in a helicopter at night under NVGs, this guy probably would have died. So, the stay and play, load and go, I made the decision we need to stay and play a little bit in the back of this ambulance to get him stable enough to transfer him to my helicopter. Because once you're in a tin, sardine can flying at, 130 knots at 5,000 feet AGL in the middle of the night, you need relative calm. And so that's what we did. And he actually had a great outcome. His lungs were almost perfectly clear by the time I got him to the tertiary receiving ER. His blood pressure started out like 219 over 170. His blood pressure was like 139 over like 90 when I got him to the hospital. So markedly improved. He lived. We got a little bit of follow-up from his family, and he got put on the appropriate medications. And I hope he's still alive today. This was in 2016, but I remember that call like it was yesterday.
So that one, you said that was one of the most frightening or whatever of your care?
Most frightening calls in my life because it's medical. Trauma's easy. Everybody always thinks gunshot wounds to the head and you get ejected and get your leg ripped off. Like, oh my God. Those are actually very easy calls for a paramedic. Stop the bleed, put a tourniquet on them, deal with their airway and drive fast. But these medical calls, these are thinking people's calls. You're doing a lot of medications, you're pushing a lot of drugs, you're doing a lot of procedures. Are you putting them on CPAP? I went right to intubation with this guy because he had so much fluid coming out. He was too far gone for CPAP, BiPAP, that mask over the face. And, on the way back home, my pilot was like, oh my God, I thought that guy was going to die. And my nurse was looking at me. She goes, oh my God, I thought that guy was going to die. And I remember looking back at my nurse and said, I was thinking too that we were going to lose this guy in the back of the ambulance.
How many years experience did you have at that point?
Well, that was 2016. So, and I started in 1990. So quite a lot. So,
a lot.
Yeah.
So how would you know even to know what to check for if the other people were there thought it was a heart attack? Like in your mind, how did you know to go to those go-tos?
As well, I think working at a trauma center for most of my life has really made me a better paramedic because, think about how many patients I see a day, right?
How many?
Probably 40.
Hundreds? Oh, okay.
A day, probably 40. So, and then I'm seeing the long-term effects. So working at a trauma center and then teaching at the paramedicine at the college and then being a critical care flight paramedic, all I'm doing is either teaching, doing skills, or I'm in training, right? Because we're always being tested. We're always having recurrent training. And as a flight paramedic, you're kind of like at the top of the game in the paramedic world, especially I'm a certified FPC. So it's the highest cert I can get in this field. And I take that seriously. And I really practice what I preach. So I'm always studying, even when I'm home, I'm looking at YouTube videos like you do. I how to do a chest tube, because maybe it's been, a year since I put a chest tube in somebody's, side. So I'm constantly testing myself.
Okay. So maybe actually from the beginning of their career, that would be a good piece of advice to look for in their spare time, like working in a trauma center or just working. I mean, even if they just do it once a month or something, right?
Absolutely. And most hospitals have per diem. Like, I'm a per diem guy. So I work 4 shifts a month. I work 4 12s, 7A to 7P a month. And it's just amazing what you see, especially at a level 1 trauma center. We're the hub of a wagon wheel. We get all the burns, we get all the peds, we get all the abuse cases, we get, the traumas from Mexico get flown over here, from Albert, from different states, from New Mexico. We get the worst of the worst. And so, when you're seeing that, you're seeing every aspect of it. So I'm starting an IV on a 1-day-old, and then the next minute I'm running over and putting an ultrasound IV in a 102-year-old patient. So it's very, it's so broad that I think without a doubt that has helped me become the paramedic that I've become, is just doing all these different things.
Diverse.
My wife's an ER doc, so I always have that challenge, like, I got to stay up with her, and I got to think at the physician level because she's that. And so that's what I tell my students. So, like, be mansion medics. We'll give you the foundation. We're pouring the foundation at school, but it's up to you to build a mansion. And you do that by listening to podcasts like Rock Your Life and staying cutting edge. I'm serious.
I like that, cutting edge. And also, and then so right there, so I know there's so much stuff though that you could share. Like, what are just some, even initially, right? Just getting, when you're first starting out, or again, new to the industry, like advice, it's either what you would have, you wish you would have known, or what if you get to the call and you really just don't know what to do? Like, you're what is just like you're a assessing or diagnostician. Like, you have to try different things to see, right? Like, they do train you in that. But like, what would you say if you were going to say, I wish I would have known that like earlier on?
Man, I wish, starting out 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I wish we would have had podcasts. Everything was paperback, right? So you had to buy books. I mean, I've given away so many books. I can't think about how many trees that I've helped kill. But now I think as a new clinician, a young clinician, there's absolutely no excuse, right? You're only going to get really good by a couple things, by just getting out there and running a ton of calls, right? But still, that takes about 2 years. I'd say the average paramedic from 0 to hero takes about 2 years in a busy 911 center, or you're running 911, and then most paramedics have multiple jobs, Nora. Paramedics don't make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And so, be diverse, run calls, and then work in an ER, work at a clinic, get maybe 2 years of experience, and then apply at a college, at a paramedic institution, because now you have to stay cutting edge, right? And you have to be ahead of your students, because your students are going to ask, well, instructor, what about this? Just like you said, what do you do as a new paramedic? And how do you know it's a stroke versus a heart attack versus a GI bleed? We get very little information as paramedics. I pull up to your house, you're dying. I am scrounging to look for any medications that I can find, drugs, alcohol, needle marks, your breath, your eyes, what do your pupils look like, your vital signs. Are you lying to me? Are your friends lying to me because they don't want to admit that you just did an 8-ball of cocaine? And we get very little information, and we have to make critical decisions a lot of the time, not all the time, on very limited information. I don't have imaging, I don't have x-ray, CT, I don't have labs other than maybe a glucose. And so, what do? As a brand new person, you should be nervous. And you should use a checklist. In my opinion, when you go to a call, you usually know what you're going to. Hey, you're going to a 28-year-old female with respiratory difficulty. Well, when you're sitting in that passenger seat, mapping your partner on the way to the call, you should be open up your guidelines and looking up, what do I do with respiratory difficulty? I think a lot of people are afraid to pull out a checklist, but I will tell you this, that a checklist keeps the operator operating at the expert level. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's being organized.
Yeah, I never am ashamed to pull out a phone app, and look up a dosage if I need to. If my pilot tries to start our helicopter without reading the checklist, that's the last time he'll ever do that, because he'll be out of a job.
So let's talk about then, because we both agree, because I like this whole communication before a call. How important is that to have with your partner?
Well, that is invaluable, especially with a new partner. And I did a podcast you mentioned already, in Tactical Tangents, and I kind of talked about that. I did a podcast with Flight Bridge Ed with Eric Bauer, called Overcoming the Need for Speed. I think I sent that one to you as well. And I had a brand new nurse. This is a real scenario. This is how people learn, right? Brand new nurse. We get dispatched for a man stabbed twice, once in the chest and once somewhere else. That's all the information we have, right? We're like, oh my God, this could be 100 things. So we walk to the aircraft, we do our walk around, our safety walk around, but we're talking about the call. And so I'm saying, okay, her name's Kelly, outstanding flight nurse, great friend. I said, okay, we've got 7 minutes until we're on scene. That's how close we were to the scene. So I said, this is going to be a BS call, and the guy's going to need a Band-Aid, and he's fine. B, he's going to need a needle in his chest because he's going to have a collapsed lung. Okay. C, this is our plan. He has a collapsed lung, and he needs a chest tube. Or D, he's got a tension pneumothorax from his collapsed lung, and we're going to need to intubate him. So if we do that, I want to use ketamine and rock, the two drugs that we like to use for this. And she goes, great. And I said, if he needs to be intubated, the tube in his mouth, Kelly, you're going to intubate, and I'm going to do the chest tube. We had all that dialed out in 7 minutes. And this is why I did this podcast with Eric Bauer on Flight Bridge Ed. So we land in this little cul-de-sac, this little LZ. I open up the back of the ambulance. We're about a 27-minute flight away from the trauma center. I open up the back of the ambulance, and I just look at the guy's chest, Nora, and he was a young Hispanic guy. He was kind of like a drug deal gone bad. And his left breast looks like he had a breast implant. And I can see that's where he was stabbed, right underneath his nipple. And I just look at the guy in my Australian accent, and I go, that guy needs a needle. Just like that, right? And the paramedic in the back of the ambulance had never done a needle decompression where you put a big needle in your chest to relieve the air. And I said, you're going to do it. She's like, what? I'm like, I got the needle. Well, she pulls out a little teeny tiny needle, and I pull out this, 14 gauge, 3 1/4 inch needle with a flush on the end. I said, drive it through his chest. And she's like, whoa, my God. And she does. And it was her first needle decompression. Now, this is a critical patient, right? He's in tension pneumothorax. He was agitated. Matter of fact, he was so agitated, he ripped his IV right in front of my face. He ripped his IV out of the arm. So he's combative. We needle him, start to relieve the pressure a little bit. And I told my nurse, we're tubing him. We're going to put an ET tube in him, and I'm going to put a chest tube. So we went right to plan D. Long story short, landed, did all that. So skids down to skids up was 23 minutes. So I put the IV in him. I taught the medic how to needle. I pushed the drugs. My nurse intubated him. Then I raised his arm up. I did the chest tube in his left side of his chest, had him all packaged up, off the ground in 23 minutes.
That's fast, right?
That's super fast.
All because you had to plan.
Because we had the plan, and because we communicated, and we involved everybody in the back of the ambulance. You're going to do this. You're going to help me do this. You're going to help my nurse do this. They got buy-in. They felt like, wow, we're part of this flight team doing this critical intervention. This is great. And I mean, they still talk about that case. I just had one of the students in there. It's like, I've heard about this case, right?
It sounds badass.
That's why communication is so important.
So what's an example of the checklist if they were going to create one of the to-dos?
So that's going to depend on their protocols, because every state, every county has different protocols, meaning what they can and can't do by their medical director. I think that my opinion would be to just keep the basics in their checklist, right? So chest pain, aspirin is the most important thing you can ever give somebody having a heart attack in the field. Aspirin. an over-the-counter drug is life-saving, right? And, aspirin, IV, EKG, nitro, for example. Your paramedics will know exactly what I'm saying with all this stuff. But to have just that system so they don't get what's called anchoring, right? They see one problem and all they do is they anchor on that one problem and then they forget about
I
everything.
can see that happening. That would like be me.
And it happens, unfortunately, it happens more in trauma because they see like this big bad bleed, right? And they'll put a tourniquet on that leg and they'll be, okay, cool, I stopped that bleeding. Let's say it's a gunshot wound. And they'll never truly check the rest of the body. And like, man, why is Nora decompensating so much? I put the tourniquet on her leg and they won't cut off your clothes and realize, oh my God, she's got a secondary gunshot wound to her chest. That's actually what's killing her.
Maybe that would be something good in training, huh? How to assess, like, look at everything, right?
Yeah, and we teach that. In
good.
High school, we teach, it's called XABCDE, or in the military, it's called March, MARCH. And we teach that, but people forget it.
Oh.
Right? Because they get so tunnel vision on one thing that they forget about that bleed that you're stopping. That's not actually killing the patient, right? The fact that they have a collapsed lung, that's what's killing the patient.
So how can they train themselves to not have the tunnel vision and get into that habit of
spaced repetition by doing training, by taking their partner and saying, hey, Nora, you and I are on the ambulance today. We're on a 24-hour shift. Right now, we're not doing anything. So instead of watching Family Guy, let's do some training, right? Let's talk about some injury patterns. Let's look at some YouTube videos. Let's look at some war videos and see these injury patterns with gunshot wounds. And, Nora, I'm gonna, have a scenario, and we're going to go over the scenario where you're going to be the team lead and I'm going to be the victim, for example, right? And I'll have some made up injuries, and just they got to find these injuries. Like I'll just we call them red dot training. They're little red dots, and I'll put a dot like on the back of my scapula, and I'll put a dot down by my ankle, and that signifies a gunshot wound or something. And you got to find it. And so, oh my God, my ankle hurts so bad, I'm bleeding to death. And then you spend 5 minutes treating my ankle, but you never really look at my chest, right? So that kind of spaced repetition, I think, is invaluable. I teach this at Talon Tactical, another thing that I do. I'm the director of training for a tactical company here in Arizona. That I say that training should be the hardest thing that you ever do in your life. That way, when you're tasked to do real world, events, you've done this so many times in your mind, or as partners, we've done this on each other so many times that now it's just routine. That you're not like, oh my God, like, oh man, that training that Nora put me through last week, that's way harder than this patient blowing bubbles at me right now. I got this.
And then do you have recommendations? Do you want to plug or name drop either some other podcasts or mentors or certain people you think that would be good for, they can decide for themselves, but.
Sure. I mean, I will definitely, I truly believe in Tactical Tangents, because they, like you, they really cater to law enforcement and pre-hospital people.
Okay.
They just did one about physical abuse, domestic violence, because it's at an all-time high with COVID right now. So that, I think that is a really good podcast to listen to, because it's about medical and law enforcement. And it's about, they don't cover mental mindset like you do. So we need some diversity, right? You have to listen to Rock Your Life. There's no doubt. And then I listen to Tactical Tangents. I listen to Deployed Medicine. And what else do I listen to a lot? And I listen to MRAP, probably the biggest medical podcast in the world. It's called EM RAP, RAP.
Okay. Funny you should say that about domestic violence, because that's another thing I do in my spare time. No, actually, I just taught, it's in Sacramento. It's not religious affiliated, but it's called St. John's. It's an 18-month program for change. So it houses women, but it also helps them find jobs or whatever. Anyway, I had 11 women in my class. So I taught them both physical, and then we did mindset stuff. So yes, I'm all about, these are my two big things, the
Yeah,
domestic violence empowerment and the first responder stuff.
it's big, and
Yeah, always.
COVID has made this so. It's just really put this in the spotlight
Hmm.
because we've seen so much
Hmm.
domestic violence. It it's just it's tragic because
Hmm.
people think.
Yeah. Is it, I think, I don't know, do we literally have 5 minutes
Um, no,
about,
I'll tell you what. We'll keep
you'll
going
tell
until
me.
the students walk in.
Okay, let's just really quickly. Okay, just some other things. That was good stuff that we went over there. Lack of sleep. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Functioning with lack of sleep. You're a pro at this, right?
I'm a pro. I get about 4 hours of sleep a day, if that. And it depends, going from the helicopter base, if you have a stand up 24, and then you're going to another job, which I would never do that. But, I think luckily for me, having ADHD is such a blessing because I'm so high functioning that I don't need a lot of sleep to do my job.
Mm.
And I'm not falling asleep, driving down the road. But, you know, I think it really depends. There's all this stuff in the news now. Oh, you need 8 hours of sleep, and if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, it's going to lead to Alzheimer's. But vice versa, if you get 12 hours of sleep a day, that leads to Parkinson's. I think for every individual, you have to find your happy medium, and you have to know your limitations. My wife, for example, if she got 4 hours of sleep a day, we'd get divorced, right?
Right, right.
I can't
I'm.
sleep 8 hours. My back will tell me get out of bed because I'll have immense back pain because I'm a back pain patient, and I like that high of that catecholamine. That what do we call it? The second wind that you get and all that kind of thing. And I just know how to operate, but I know my limitations too. And sometimes you just have to take your safety nap.
Well, let me ask you this though. It unless you got used to it, just like people that fast and don't really eat, do you think maybe you've just gotten used to it? Because doesn't it affect your performance? Look at what you're dealing with, your type of work.
Yeah. Well, it does, but for me, too much sleep affects my performance too because you have to worry about sleep inertia and all that other thing that when you come out of these long sleeps that your body's still in that mode. And to me, I've had sleep inertia flying before, especially at night, and it's just like I I don't remember the last 5 miles in the air. Like where the
What's
hell
sleep
were we?
what's sleep inertia?
So sleep inertia is when you go to sleep, you're tired, right? And then you wake up and you've got to perform some critical task. You get the tones go off. Doo doo. Nora Ryan, you got to launch right now. A vehicle rollover with a bus full of hemophiliac babies. You're like, oh my god, right? So you, as you get up, you're physically doing things, but your brain is not there yet. So we call this sleep inertia. You're moving and you're moving forward in your tasks, but you're not fully awake. You're not there, so you can forget things. You can walk into a rollerblade system. You can get hit by a moving car because you're just not cognitively awake yet. So you're kind of moving in the right direction, but you're really not there. You're not with it. You're not times 4. You're still kind of drowsy.
So is really kind of the lesson is know yourself. Not everybody needs the certain amount of sleep or whatever it is, but also just because I'm not trying to help you, like, I guess it's more so I would be wanting to help, like, if it's affecting you in a negative way because you are having lack of sleep, like what you would do in that moment. And again, I don't know what acupressure point is off of that. I think it actually is just doing something like this, but there's certain things that you can do. But yeah. Is
Yeah, for
there any
people that
advice? Yeah. Uh-oh, the audio went out. Maybe you hit something on your there it goes. Okay,
okay.
yeah.
I would say that you can go to a sleep specialist for one. A saving grace for me is I take Ambien. I take
What's
Zolpidem
that for? To stay awake?
to sleep. I'm I'm
Mm.
I'm like high functioning on these medications sometimes, but for me, what works for me is when I'm at the flight base, if I need to take a safety nap, I'll get up in the middle of a conversation and tell my nurse, "Hey, I'm gonna go take a safety nap. That's just the way it's gonna be," and I'll just go and I'll take a 30-minute, 40-minute nap. I'll set my alarm so it's never over about an hour and a half, because that's when you get into that sleep inertia, and that just
Hmm.
makes me more groggy. And then people just need to know how can they function. Not everybody needs 8 hours, but most people need a hell of a lot more than 4 hours of sleep. I will say that.
Okay, let me ask you this then. And I know you've been doing this for a really long time, and I don't know to say that you don't appreciate it. As far as being still, because you love your work, you've told me that before, the thrill, the everything. You definitely want to still be doing this for a very long time. Is it that not that you don't appreciate it, you just rather be working than being still or meditating or having quiet time or staring at a blank wall, for like, you know what I mean, as a way to like just de-stress? Like, does that not sound appealing to you?
No, that sounds horrible. That gives me internally, I have anxiety listening to all those words. Um, I I'm not the poster child of how to de-stress in a positive way. I de-stress by working constantly. Um, I don't need to work. Like I said, my wife's an ER doc, and she gets on me. It's probably one of our biggest battles. Is she's like, we just got back from vacation. The very next day, you're teaching ultrasound at the hospital, and then you're going to your flight shift overnight. Like, what? What is wrong with you? And it's because like I was actually looking forward. I loved my vacation; it was fun, but I was looking forward to getting back to work. I was looking forward to teaching ultrasound and flying in a helicopter. And I can't sit still. I mean, we've been on here for 51 minutes, and you can probably see when you play it back. Like I'm just like woohoo! Like it's very hard for me to
Do
sit
you
still.
think do you think though, because again, whether it's how you're raised or whatever, it's not appealing to you? Like, it doesn't sound fun, you're not being productive? What do you think?
I think that's a good word. Yeah, if I'm sitting still, like staring at a wall, one, I'm not productive, right? Do I like my downtime? Sure. I loved watching live PD. I miss that show. So I watch like active self protection and things like that to kind of stimulate my brain and learn some moves, that and then help me advance in
Right.
my law enforcement side. So I do some downtime, but it's very, very little. Like I'll watch, I'll learn something on YouTube for like an hour and a half, and then I gotta go. I'm gonna go out and jump in the pool, or I'm gonna start cutting, leaves down, or I'm gonna wash my truck for the third time. As you can see, I'm a little OCD, and that's how I de-stress.
Okay. Okay, so maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, just like that doesn't sound fun and appealing to you.
No, sitting around drives me insane. My wife can sit and watch
Mhm.
Lifetime for 12 hours in a row, and
Mhm.
I can sit there
Mhm.
for about an hour, and then I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Mhm.
I'd come home from Iraq and like poke her in the arm at 4 o'clock in the morning. What are we doing? What are we doing? She goes, when are you going back? Like,
Mhm.
I need some more sleep.
Mhm. Okay, and the only reason that I'm bringing this up is because you and I are like normal people, in the sense, like, just because I've learned some skills for life, I definitely don't think I'm better than anybody or an expert or whatever. If anything, I feel like I'm a pro though at negative thinking, like in the past. So what I was going to say is, because you still do some drinking,
I do.
so we want to, it's just how people manage that's why I'm trying to expand and let people know, though, we're sharing that these different things again to manage life, and like, we're not perfect, and nobody said don't ever drink. And
Right.
so it's just how people use it and things like that. So I don't know, I guess I was just bringing that up, just saying like that is one of your ways.
It
You
is
might.
one of my, yeah, it was a very destructive way. I'll say when I came home from Iraq, it was pretty bad. It was probably the biggest fights that I've ever had in my life, with my wife, who one day I came home and I went to the refrigerator outside, and every Michelob Ultra she had taped on every single can in there this piece of paper, and she doesn't know it, but I saved them. And every can, it say this can say, does this make you stronger? Does this make you a better paramedic? Are you happy? Are you a better father to your animals by drinking? You know, does this make you feel
Love
better?
it.
What about me? I was in
Mm.
tears, Nora,
Mm-hmm.
very carefully
So beautiful.
untaking these things and taking them off. I was in tears.
So,
And, you know, she finally confronted me in the backyard and said, something's got to change. And,
mm-hmm.
you know, do I still drink? Yeah. Not nearly as much, but I used it as therapy, as
Yeah.
a way to escape, you know, because going to a therapist in my mind, like, what's a
Mm-hmm.
therapist going to tell me? Right. You've
Mm-hmm.
got a little bit of PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I know that,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not the guy that can go on
Mm-hmm.
Lexapro or
Mm-hmm.
any of those SSRIs because I've got a little bit of hypomania, and that
Mm-hmm.
brings out suicidal
Mm-hmm.
ideation in people, and I don't want to be that guy, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Such a beautiful thing and good wife.
Oh, she's
Well, I
better than
think too. I think though too. What I want to say is, because people could say all the stuff that I'm into or whatever. Nobody said don't do, like, for example of that. I can see how it's an escape, or it helps. It helps me laugh. You know, even if I'm doing it a couple of times a year, but just letting people know, and don't be hard on yourself. Again, nobody said don't drink, like that you can't be positive minded and whatever it is and still have those moments. It's just how excessive you are about it, and having other options than just choosing that every day. You know what I mean?
that's correct.
And I think again, that's just moving the future forward, that there are other solutions and people are finding out more about them. And I'm just like the vault of these different solutions. I feel like our camera thing is being possessed because it keeps flashing. Like, do you see that? It's
No,
funny.
mine's completely still.
Okay, I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
it's the thing. Okay, well, why don't we so anyway, I just wanted to bring that up again because it just brings another relatable thing, that it doesn't mean like none of us would, like, we don't have things that are go-tos that isn't always a meditating or whatever is. But just because I already believe in mind, body, spirit and healing, like, it would be nice to see that you rested sometimes, or maybe incorporated music or some other sorts of beautiful things, because of all the things you've gone through, which I don't even know, they're very healing to your spirit, you know? So it's a way of self-care. It's a
It
self-care
is.
thing.
It is. There's, you know, a couple times a year I crank out my guitar, I play acoustic, and I'll just play in the backyard. And luckily I can listen to a song 5 times and then play it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very distressing for me. And believe it or not, so I just drove 5,400 miles in 16 days. And our RV didn't move unless I had a podcast on,
Mm-hmm.
or my music playing, and that does really calm me down. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could listen to music flying in a helicopter, but you can't. But
Okay.
I don't do anything in my house. If I'm cleaning the pool, I have music on. If I'm picking up weeds, I have music on. And I will say, ultimately, Nora, that is probably my best de-stressor,
Mm-hmm.
is music. And it drives my wife crazy because I can listen to the same song for a week straight. I put it on repeat on my phone, and she'll be like, oh my God, is Despacito playing again?
Ah!
I've been listening to this thing for a month. I'm like, I can't stop listening to it.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious that you play that, and not everybody else knows that we have another common bond of our punk rock music.
Yeah. Social Distortion, they're punk. The Sex Pistols. Oh my God, TSOL. Yeah.
But the mindset, though, I don't know, and we can close up soon. The mindset is what I want to bring to their attention, because that's a huge part of, like, as you would agree too, right? Mindset, like the whole, whatever parts of it, that, you know, being an individual, or just the strength to survive. And then also, you know, just it's mindsets for a longer discussion of a show, but so many different things you can apply, I think, like that to your, you know, your industry. Not following the crowd. I'm sure there's certain things, right?
There are. Are you there? Oh no.
I don't know what happened.
Hey, you're back.
That was weird.
I'm glad you brought the mindset thing up before we ended, because we all know what's going on, right? There's more paramedics, EMTs, physicians, law enforcement committing suicide than ever before. And one, I mean, the media is also, making it more every time it happens, it's more prolific. But, career cops, I've had a couple of my friends now have died from suicide. And I think it's one of the biggest travesties in teaching. We don't do enough of it in paramedicine. I don't think that, we spend so much time on curriculum that the well-being of the paramedic, that's what the class is called, it's a very short thing, right? It's like, oh, if you see your partner Nora is getting out of shape, or she's not joining for dinner, or she's leaving work early, there might be a problem. Well, that's not good enough, right? You need to challenge. You need to challenge your friends. We say, hey, Nora, how you doing today? And Nora says, oh, I'm fine. And we go, okay, great. Because that's what I want to hear. I want to hear Nora say she's fine. But what happens when I say, hey, Nora, how you doing today? Ryan, I'm really not doing that good. What do you do? Most people go, oh, shit, now what do I do? Right? Like, okay, well, are you going to go talk to somebody? See ya. And they bail. Or they need to say, wait, did you say you're not doing good? Well, am I somebody you can confide in and talk to about that? Like, well, what's happening, Nora? Can I understand that situation? If not, can I find somebody to understand that situation? But the mindset thing, I think, is our biggest weakness. And people are still afraid to talk about it. We need to change the culture. And, in our job, especially, in the military, if you say, oh, I'm having problems, oh, you're weak, then we're pulling you off your Little Bird.
Right.
You can't do this job. You need to go be a personnel man. And then that's when they go and commit suicide. Where we need to say, you can continue in this job, but let's find somebody to talk about with that. It's okay to not be okay. I know that's so cliche now, but it truly is. And I'm not okay. And I'm a happy person, man. I've got some skeletons, but I'm happy. I sleep well at night. But I've had people like you to talk to and reflect on and say, wow, Nora's mentioned my drinking a couple times. And believe it or not, that has made me take one less beer out of the refrigerator before. But like, wait a minute. Your friends can say something to you all day long. But when somebody says something to you that you don't really know, you're like, oh my God, look at this revelation. Nora said she liked my haircut today. When my wife says, oh, I've told you that for 5 months. Yeah, but somebody new told me that. And that's where we need to be better as a society with our mindset and really listen to people if they say they're not okay. Challenge them.
Well, I think attention. Okay, I love everything. I love everything you said. Do you got to go in a minute?
I'm going to have to go. Yeah. Students are walking in. They're all staring at me like, what are you doing?
Oh, yeah. Do they want to be on the show?
So do you guys want to be on the show? So,
oh, what's happening?
This is Rock Your Life.
This is why he's like the best. He's like the best instructor that I've found thus far from YouTube.
Yeah, so I'll explain them like what this is in a while. But
I think just number one, most importantly, acting like we care and we care and that we give a fuck is really checking on with each other, because really, though, anybody, I don't care what you are or whatever, like somebody has some thoughts and low points and whatever. So I think really just, again, that is just like checking in and really acting like you care and listening. Sometimes people will say things, right? They already said some context clues.
Yeah, and this is what I found most of the time is after a Sentinel event happens, we go back and we do an after action. And we say, hey, X, shot up the school. And people then go, oh my God. Last week, he was acting crazy or he's acting bizarre. And, does he say something? Well, I didn't want to be that person. What if I was wrong? Well, you weren't wrong. And now, the Parkland shooter guy, who I just read this incident, funny, we're talking about this last night and on the media. And after he shot up the school, at Parkland, everybody came out and said this guy had been acting bizarre for months, and all these people had all these stories about him. And if one person would have just spoke up and said something, maybe not to him initially, right, because they don't know him, but went to the counselor, went to the principal, went to their teacher and said, hey, Jacob has actually been drawing murder pictures and is talking more about guns, and he's buying all these guns and ammo, and this is not the person he is. all it takes is to be one change of domino, positive change, right? Dominoes fall. But if you're that positive domino to stop that de-escalation, that's all it takes sometimes. But people just have to have the fortitude and be okay to say, are you all right? And if you're not, let's talk about it. And if you don't want to trust me, let's find somebody for you to talk to, right? But you got to talk about it. And talking about it's not being a pussy. I think not talking about it is the wrong thing to do.
Right.
And I've had that conversation with my guys in Iraq many times. Talk to me, talk to somebody, or you're going home.
Well, the newer generation, I think, is more open to being vulnerable. So that's a good thing now. They'll just pretty much share everything.
Are you guys vulnerable as a younger
Yes.
generation?
Huh? Very?
Very? Okay. Yes.
Well, the thing
They're
is,
very vulnerable.
well, the thing is, too, I think they realize, too, that other people feel the same way. You're not the only one. So you might as well, like, what's the harm? What are you going to lose in sharing? Like, judging? Who the fuck cares?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, what, like, you know what I mean? Like, don't think I have all my things in a row or whatever, that I'm just trying to, the work that I do in this life, I don't know. It's just like, there's stuff that I go through too. It's like, I have to, though, live positive all the time. There's plenty of things to be depressed about every day, as you know. Right? Okay.
Yep. So for the new people out there, talk to each other, don't just be work buddies, try to hang out outside of work too, because you gotta learn to separate. And I think that's why I do so many jobs. I don't have any full-time job. I've got a lot of small little things, because I get to talk to people that they're like, Ryan, why are you so happy all the time? Like, because I don't do anything full time. I'm not married down by politics and administration. I come in, I do my job, I go away, and I don't come back for 2 weeks. And I'm the happiest person in the world, because then I can talk to other people about that, and people that want to talk to me about that say, well, I don't get it. Well, let's diversify. Maybe let's not do one thing over and over for 20 years. Let's diversify and do multiple things and expand your brain. As humans, we're not made to do one thing for 20 years, in my opinion, right?
And I think also best piece of advice to all the new people is expand your circle, like outside of first responders, please. Because look at what they could learn from talking to people like me.
They're listening to you.
Kind of like it's kind of like therapy. I'm such a vault of different things, and I can find any sort of anything. Like you and I would both agree, music therapy first. And then there's so many other things, and it doesn't always involve talking. So, but definitely expand your circle and talk to people. Because when you're in your unless you're in your uniform, like I'm not gonna know anything about you, even though I talk to everybody. It's like I'm not gonna know, and you guys don't do anything if you're working all the time. Like, how am I meeting you? You know what I mean? Yep. So you only hang out in your groups. How are we gonna meet you?
Exactly.
Yeah, they're at the grocery store here in California.
Let me leave you with this.
Okay.
I have to get the class going again. So for everybody out there that is afraid to do all these things, or has some apprehension or whatever, remember that more dreams are crushed by fear than by failure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
yes,
you have to go out. You need to be uncomfortable, right, to really succeed. If you just say, I just want to stay here because I'm afraid of branching out. I'm very comfortable in my little circle, and you don't do anything else, well, that's fine. And that's okay if that's who you want to be. But your ultimate more dreams, in my opinion, are killed by fear than by failure. I'd rather try and fail than not do it just because I was fearful of not doing it.
I think when you get off of this call, you should have your students write down why they are doing this, what makes them, passionate about it. And that's going to help remind them, because if you are passionate and love what you do, you're going to be eager to learn. You're going to want to advance your skills. You're going to want to know, how can I be better? How can I do better? How can I best serve? Right? That's cliche, but it's true, because I'm always like, how can I do my best work? What can I do today to give my best, like in whatever I'm doing, everything I've learned in life.
I try to instill that with my students here. There's no doubt.
That's good.
Most of them hopefully would say that. Like, I talk to them on day one, like they're mini.
Why?
I want them to be better, and I want them to take care of me, and my family and my Pomskis, like I would take care of their family. And they can do it, and they don't need to do it as long as I do to be great. with all these resources and podcasts and everything.
I know.
My
God.
You're such an.
I know. Podcast. No excuse.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Excellent.
And there's much more we could talk about. So we'll see if
Absolutely.
we have you a guest again, and maybe one of your students or something.
Yeah. I'll have to pregame them.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. This is Rock Your Life with Nora Finch and Ryan Wyatt, combat flight medic instructor, and more.
Yeah. Great talking to you, Nora.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye, guys.